Hello, everyone. Hope everybody had a good day. Had a good day. Hope everything is working. Um, I don't usually do as many lives as I used to, so it's always a challenge to see that things are working right. So, yeah, hopefully it all comes together. Anyway, so happy Easter, everybody. Um, it's going to be the topic of what I'm working on today, and should be good. Should be good. I'm streaming this to our website on um, driventransformations.live. Um, and What's Up Alexandria post. So see how it goes, right? Cool. So one of the things that we deal with is we get caught up in uh, just the story, and I think many times becomes just a source of entertainment of sorts, and we don't seek the principles of the story. And so I was digging into that a little bit, and thought I would share some of that with you. Um, One of the things is how can Jesus's words and how they relate to the Old Testament help society. Um, so Jesus' words, as recorded in the New Testament, they often build on and reinterpret um, the full and fulfill themes from the Old Testament. Um, this offering teachings that emphasize love, justice, compassion, and moral integrity. Exploring how these teachings relate to the Old Testament, following up with their potential benefit uh, to society. This involves uh, looking at their ethical and practical implications. So let's break it down, kind of step by step, then focus on the key principles and their relevance uh, to modern societal challenges. Jesus' words, the first, Jesus' words as a fulfillment of the Old Testament. And two, the Sermon on the Mount and ethical living. And three, the compassion and care for the marginalized and quite frankly, all people, right? For the moral integrity and truth. Um, Five, forgiveness and reconciliation. These are all very important principles in modern society, uh, in everyday life. Jesus frequently referenced the Old Testament. He presented his teachings as a continuation and fulfillment of its laws and prophecies. For example, Matthew 5:17, he says, "Do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets, but to fulfill that." Uh, so Jesus is uh, Jesus came to explain it in a sense, right? Um, and then uh, fulfill the law and the prophecies, right? So this connection underscores a continuity of values and like justice, mercy, faithfulness. These can guide societal behavior. Um, uh, Old Testament foundation, the Old Testament, particularly the Torah, emphasizes the covenant between God and humanity. He did this by using laws like the Ten Commandments in Exodus 20, promoting ethical behaviors like honoring others, respecting property, maintaining truthfulness, huge, right? The prophets like Isaiah and Micah call for justice and the care for the marginalized, like in Micah 6:8. Um, to act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. Jesus, uh, Jesus had a message, right? And it was good for all mankind, excuse me, all mankind. And the excuse me, I gotta get something in my throat here. It was good for all mankind. Um, so that sounds bad, doesn't it? But gotta like stay hydrated. Um, so Jesus's refinement, uh, Jesus distilled these principles into core teachings. Principles such as the greatest commandment in Matthew 22, 37, 40, loving God and loving your neighbors as yourself. This also summarizes the moral essence of the Old Testament law and shifts the focus from legalistic adherence. This is important. This is a big one for society if you're running a business. If you want to have a better outcome, this is a good one to focus on. From the legalistic adherence to heartfelt compassion. Humanity is what that's referring to. Societal impact, by emphasizing love and neighborliness. Jesus' teachings encourage social cohesion in a polarized world, prioritizing mutual respect, empathy. These can reduce conflict and foster community, bring people together. For instance, loving one's neighbor could inspire initiatives like community outreach programs, reducing inequality and supporting disadvantaged, aligning with the Old Testament calls to care for widows, orphans, strangers, right? So when we love our neighbors as we love ourselves, so it's important to love yourself because you want to love your neighbors as you love yourself. So love yourself a lot, so you love your neighbors a lot, so you love God a lot, right? Just a little play on words, I guess, Um, when we talk about inspiring initiatives like community outreach programs, that doesn't mean the government. That means the people. The people do this. One of the Jesus's big things was stepping away from the legalistic and focusing on the humanity, where humans take care of other humans, and not necessarily through the legal process, right? The Sermon on the Mount and ethical living. The Sermon on the Mount is a cornerstone of Jesus' teachings. where he reinterprets the Old Testament, uh, the laws that emphasize inner righteousness over external compliance. Again, going back to that legalist thing. For example, an eye for an eye versus turn the other cheek, right? Jesus advocates for non-retaliation and forgiveness over vengeance, right? Non-retaliation and forgiveness over vengeance. Love your neighbor, love your enemies. If you don't give some grace to help somebody work through their garbage, even if they're coming against you, they're just going to continue to do more garbage, right? Doesn't mean sit and take it. It means you got to love them enough to actually stand up and explain to them, even if it's uncomfortable, that what they're doing is not beneficial, right? So Jesus expands the scope of love to include adversaries, right? Promoting reconciliation, societal impact. These teachings challenge cycles of violence and division. Now, we all come to that place where there's a choice, where you can choose to elevate an uncomfortable situation or de-escalate. It's a choice that you have to make at the time, and you'll know if it's the right one if on what the outcome is, right? In practice, they could inspire restorative justice systems where rehabilitation and forgiveness take precedence over punitive measures. That just makes sense. You want more people to be functional members of society, and by constant punishment just keeps that negative mindset within them. Rehabilitation, I think, is a great way to restructure our legal system, right? We got prison reform initiatives, conflict mediation workshops. They reflect all this stuff, right? It reduces recidivism and it fosters peace, right? For example, loving enemies also encourages dialogue across particular cultural divides, which is critical in addressing issues of polarization, tribalism in society. We see a lot of stuff that's been ramping up over the last few years, 10 years in particular. People talking about their tribe. When we divide, nothing good comes of that. It's good to have people in your corner, but it's good to invite more people into your corner and be open. Doesn't mean you have to agree with what people got going on. You can speak, against behaviors, but don't hate the person. Don't hate the person. Both the Old Testament and Jesus' words, prioritize, the vulnerable, and that includes people that are, deal with anger issues, depression, whatever. We all have our stuff, right? So we need to be compassionate and care for the marginalized and everybody, quite frankly. The Old Testament repeatedly calls for justice for poor and oppressed. I could think over the years, there's been a exploitation of the words that have emotional value, like oppressed. So it almost became like everybody's oppressed, right? And everybody's poor. But all that's subjective, and it's just relative to where you're at in your life, So anyway, Isaiah 1:17 says, "Seek justice and encourage the oppressed," and that's important. We're not supposed to coddle them. We're supposed to encourage them to come out of that place, right? Jesus echoes this in his ministry, associating with outcasts, like um, associated with taxpayers, sinners, and the sick, and etc. And the teachings and the parables, like the Good Samaritan in Luke 10:25 through 37, which redefines neighbor as anyone in need, regardless of the social boundaries. There's a societal impact. And this emphasis on compassion can guide policies and actions to address systematic inequalities. We're all supposed to be created with the equal opportunities, where our governing structures don't single out one class of people, regardless, whether it's for good or whether it's for bad. It's supposed to be neutral, right? So all people have equal opportunities, right? For example, got the big things going like healthcare and welfare, and the exploitation of those words like poor and oppressed. Those same mindsets are and people that are controlling a lot of these things, like in the healthcare and the welfare. They've been exploiting those programs for their own personal benefit. That's why I believe it's so important that the community takes the place of what the government is doing in whatever way that the community can. It avoids any opportunity for exploitation or fraud or et cetera, these types of things. Jesus is healing miracles and care for the suffering. Matthew 14:14. Aligned with the Old Testament calls to protect the weak, supporting universal focus on health for everybody, and like social guidelines, right? That's inclusive, and that's literally for everybody. There's no differentiation. The government's not supposed to be determining one over the other, right? It's just supposed to have equal opportunity for everybody, no matter what, and not over apply one for the other, try to create a balance, but just to step aside and let the balance be the balance, right? Just keep the guidelines in place to keep things moving in the right direction. So there's moral integrity, which what I was just describing is abundantly necessary to govern and to manage society. So moral integrity and truth. Truth literally heals everything. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, and sometimes people want to repaint the truth with whatever falsehood that they got going on. Like an example, if someone was trying to clean up any problems that we're dealing with, some of the social benefit programs, the people that would be benefiting from that would paint it as they're taking those things away, and in reality, they're taking away just the pieces that are corrupted. When people get dependent on not on the programs, but when the people that administer these programs are profiting in some kind of way that's not beneficial to the recipient, they'll fight to hold on to it and use whatever means necessary, right? So Jesus' teachings were rooted in the Old Testament wisdom, that stressed truth and integrity. For instance, there reinforces the commandments, against false witness. False witness is huge. If you've ever had to deal with someone that's been accused falsely, it is devastating to their life and to their soul. It's really something that you wouldn't expect until you've seen it. It goes so deep. Let's just be truthful about people. Let's urge honesty in speech, right? Let your yes be yes and your no be no. That's Matthew 5:37. The Old Testament prophets also condemned deceit and corruption. Um, Societal impact in an era of misinformation and distrust of institutions. These principles advocate for transparency and accountability. Transparency is huge. It's such a big thing. I just completely live my life that way, so I have nothing to hide. It gives people zero control over me. Um, it, it's okay to have a bad day and um, not be perfect because that's each and every one of us. So it's okay. Don't ever think you have to be perfect. Just learn from where you're at and kind of move on and figure it out. Um, so transparency and accountability, could inspire like ethical journalism, which is something that's also very much needed. Um, I'm working on some new media sources, so it's been a while. It takes a while. These are very expensive, and but they're coming along. Fact checking initiatives. We need journalists that are out there that are actually uh, looking for documentation from the core, from the source, right? And reforms in government is also needed to combat corruption. We need to have transparency. It's so big. Let it all be open, and on a personal level, right? Fostering honesty strengthens relationships and builds trust in your own communities, in your homes, in your families, right? Forgiveness and reconciliation are key. Right? Jesus emphasizes forgiveness. Matthew 6:14, 15. If you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. This builds on the Old Testament themes of God's mercy, like in Psalms 103, 8, 12. Right? His call to forgiveness, 70 times 7. Matthew 18:22 pushes beyond legalistic limits to a lifestyle of grace. If you want to live a happy life, learn how to give grace. The societal impact, forgiveness, can break cycles of resentment and vengeance. So remember, there's that moment I was talking about before where you have a choice. You can choose whether to go and elevate negative or elevate the positive. We run into those types of things many times a day, right? And forgiveness can break those resentment and vengeance cycles, which fosters peace in a fractured relationship or a fractured society, right? Truth and reconciliation commissions, like those in like South Africa, like the apartheid, that reflect the principle of prioritizing healing over retribution. They've been doing a lot of stuff down there. There's a lot of shifting going on, and I hope they get it figured out. On a smaller scale, teaching forgiveness in schools or workplaces can reduce bullying or workplace conflicts, creating a healthier environment, practical applications in modern society, right? It's so important to work, like if you're a business owner, to work on a incentive base and not a punitive base. Create such a more productive and profitable work environment. And once you lose that flow and you get stuck on the negative, it's hard to pull it back, but it's doable. You just got to dig in and do it. And to make these teachings actionable, society, like education, can integrate ethical teachings inspired by Jesus and the Old Testament into character education, emphasizing on empathy, honesty, and justice, or policy, the advocate for laws, reflecting compassion and fairness, such as equal wealth availability, ability to jobs. They call it wealth distribution, but you still have to earn what you're doing. So if you have access to income, everybody should have access. Be able to go out and make their way, or criminal justice reform. Drawing on the prophetic call to justice, community initiatives, that support, grassroots efforts like food banks, homeless shelters, churches or whatever, Good Samaritan type stuff, for each other, for our communities, where it's community driven and not so much by policy necessarily, right? Where it's a people centered initiatives. Personal practice would be like to encourage individuals to model these values, right? Forgiving others, helping strangers, or speaking truthfully, creating a ripple effect in their circles, potential challenges while teaching teachings that offer, profound benefits, challenges, when challenges arise, there's interpretation, differing views on Jesus' word and Old Testament laws, that can lead to disagreements, but use discernment, right? Use discernment. Jesus' message is for the world, in a secular context. Applying religious principles in pluralistic societies requires a sensitivity to avoid alienating non-religious groups. Focusing on the actual principles and universal principles, life processes, like compassion and fairness can bridge this gap. Hypocrisies in everybody's lives. There's religious institutions and individuals together that fail to live up to Jesus's message, right? And that means to be loving to everybody, right? All that's grounded in the Old Testament and provide a timeless ethical framework that strengthens society by promoting love and compassion and integrity. By applying these principles to modern challenges, things like poverty, division, injustice, society can build stronger, more equitable opportunities to build wealth and health, within your communities. Whether through policy, education, or personal action, these teachings encourage the world where people prioritize the common good, echoing the Old Testament vision of a just and merciful society. It's so important that we view other human beings from the core as a fellow human being. God blew his breath of life into all mankind. We get lost in the layers of life that we're all just trying to navigate. But inside here, we're all the same. Because that's that same life, the same breath of life that God put in every single person. We can shed these layers of society garbage off of everyday life, in people's existence, and understand through grace that people are just trying to make it through their journey, right? They have a journey too, right? They have a journey too. I don't know why I keep doing this. It's so funny. Anyway, we're all on a journey in life, right? That journey uh, is simply laid out from dust to dust, right? From birth to death. That journey in the middle is what we control of right now, right? The words of um, fulfillment, when Jesus was to fulfill the prophecies. He had a great message, and we need to really think about that. This is Easter, and Jesus gave his life um, for all humanity. He never strayed from the truth. What he said, he stuck by it. They wanted him to change what he was saying, but he wouldn't do it. So we're supposed to do that in our everyday life. You live truth, and don't let anybody in this world mess with the truth. You stand by it. Truth is the solid rock. A lie will fade with time. Truth will always be the truth, right? The Sermon on the Mount covered so much of this. Um, it's kind of a guideline, really, to a healthy society. It really is, and that's through compassion and care for the marginalized. And really, what that means is that um, if somebody's in need, help them out. If you're walking out of a grocery store, somebody drops their bag of food or whatever, go help them out. Help them pick it up. It's not a big deal. That's the way we need to be. Be compassionate in every moment. Doesn't mean someone's life needs to be completely broken. Somebody just may need a hand picking up their stuff, right? Moral integrity and truth. So important. Don't let somebody else's darkness dim your light. Don't let somebody else draw you away from the truth. You stay strong in the truth, always. We're all on a journey. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all just trying to figure it out. You have a set of choices in any moment, and you don't know which way to go. Sometimes the only way to learn is to take a step. Sometimes you knock on the wrong door and it opens up, and it isn't until you get there that you realize that wasn't the best choice. You gotta try to step back out of that, pick a different door to walk through, different path to walk on. But we have to figure it out. Sometimes you make a wrong choice, dial it back, hop on the right path, right? When we make mistakes, when we open that wrong door, make sure you reconcile. Say, I'm sorry. It's not that hard. It really isn't. It's one of the easiest things in the world, or it should be. For some, it's hard. It's hard for people to admit that they made a mistake. I'll tell you what, I make mistakes all the time. So do you. It's okay. So, with that, I'm going to conclude. You all have a wonderful Easter. Understand these principles that Jesus put out there for us to live by. So, God bless.